Hello and welcome to Creative Conversations. I'm Dave Fuller, and it's my absolute pleasure to introduce you today to Kariné Poghosyan. Have I got that right?
Perfect.
Perfect. Well, how about that? Can't do better than perfect. And Kariné is a classical pianist who is coming to us today from New York, where it's 9 o'clock in the morning. And it's currently 11 o'clock at night here. So I was just saying to Kariné off chat that I love technology and I love that we can connect across the globe this way. So welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's an absolute pleasure. I have to say, I don't want to embarrass you, but I've been following you for a little while now, and I'm a bit of a fanboy.
I'm flattered.
I love your work. I think you're amazing. So I'm going to encourage everyone, and I'll put your links in the show notes, but I want to encourage everyone to go along and watch Kariné play. And I challenge you all not to be moved. There you go. It's my challenge to you all because I think you're wonderful. So how long have you been playing? When did you start playing? How old?
My official lessons began at about age 7, although we did have a piano at home, and I am told I was extremely obnoxious and I would go and bang around on the piano, make horrible noises. So apparently that encouraged my parents to take me to piano lessons, and at age 7 I officially began.
Oh, fantastic. And one of the questions I do ask, was there a moment for you, I guess, age 7 you started playing, but was there, I don't know, even at that young age, a light bulb moment where you just knew you were creative, or it just happened?
You know, it's interesting you ask. It's definitely, I had a moment because at the very beginning when I started lessons, I realized I really hated it. I was very lazy. I didn't want to sit at the piano for hours and play boring scales and, those bare neat etudes. Yeah. Oh my God. So I was really a terrible piano student. I did love to just improvise, just to have fun, but playing etudes and scales, that was torture. And then around age 13, I definitely felt a shift happen. And I also, probably a coincidence, I had the change of a teacher. That also helped probably. And my second teacher was completely different in her approach. She made it so much more fun and adventurous, and it really felt like a game. Like, let's find all these different colors and characters in the music, and let's tell this story and not tell it this way. And it became incredibly creative and interesting, and I definitely became a musician at that point. That's when the switch happened.
Wow.
13, 14.
Well, very good. 13 to 15 is very young. And when did you make, I guess, your public debut? When did you first play live to an audience?
Well, the very, very first performance was back right when I started that first year, age 7. It was this huge concert. And I think I may have shared with you this very funny story where I was extremely nervous. And I looked up at my teacher, my first piano teacher, with this baby eyes, puppy eyes, and just looking for some encouragement. And she just very cool-heartedly said, "Well, you're scared, go home." And it was one of the most defining sentences I've ever heard, because instead of discouraging me, that actually made me really angry. And I was like, no, I worked really hard. God damn it, I'm going to go out there and play my heart out. So yeah, that's a very special memory, that very first experience on the stage.
Wow, that's a pretty amazing reaction from a 7-year-old. I think most 7-year-olds would probably justifiably go running to mum, you know. I would have.
I don't know how I got the guts inside, but I think I was excited to perform, and I just was like, well, I'm just going to go and do it and have a good time.
Well done you, and you've been doing it ever since.
Thank you.
When did you know that you wanted to pursue it as a career, music?
I think that that moment when 13, 14, when it became much, much more than just, this one activity, it just became a deep passion. It became, it's interesting. I never actually made the decision to make it a career. It just became a part of me. It became my identity and my passion, and it just was inseparable. I just, even if I wanted to, I couldn't separate myself from it. So yeah, it's been a lifelong journey with lots of highs, lots of lows, and trials and triumphs. But I'm grateful, I'm very grateful.
Let's talk a little bit about that journey, perhaps. But before we do, I want to ask you a question. It was one of the very first things that struck me when I first saw you play. Something came to mind from a book I'd read several years ago, and I went in search of the quote. And are you familiar with Benjamin Zander?
Mm-hmm.
Who talks, he is amazing. And I read his book, The Art of Possibility, many years ago, Art of Possibilities. And one thing that really I remembered from that book was he spoke about one cheek or one buttock playing.
I love that video, the way you demonstrate that.
And I think you do, when I watch you play, that was the first thing that came to mind. I don't know if anyone's ever told you that.
No one has ever made the comparison, but yeah, definitely. I think I do that quite a bit.
I think you do, and I think that's a wonderful thing. That's you really bring a passion to it, and it's clear that you say that it's your identity and a deep part of you, and that's clear when you play. So, and that was around 13 or 14 where you really felt that click.
Yeah, I did. I really did. It's been a nonstop thread. I mean, it definitely has had lots of highs and lows, lots of moments of pretty deep doubt as far as, what am I doing? But somehow on the inside, on a subconscious level, it just has been this sense of knowing that no matter what, this is my path. This is what God meant for me. So I'm born somehow.
I want to talk a little bit about that. The challenges. The highs, the lows, and ask you, what are some of the challenges you've had to overcome to pursue your passion?
Last year by itself, or
in any point of time, really, in order to pursue your passion throughout life in playing. Sure. Only things you're comfortable with sharing, of course. But I ask simply because I think all artists, all creatives, have challenges to face, and I
mean, it's been it's fascinating. I think these challenges somehow never go away. They just take on different shapes and different guises. Early on, the challenge was just the mere idea and the ability to actually study and play, because my country was going through a war, Armenia, and it was several years of pretty terrible times, just back to dark ages with no electricity, no heat. And just to be able to actually practice was quite an ordeal. I still remember with a little candlelight trying to practice. And so it was a struggle in that sense. And then I remember my parents and I immigrating to the United States. And when we first came, we couldn't, it was the most typical American immigrant story, starting from absolute zero. So at that point in time, it was absolute survival mode, just trying to, put bread on the table. So the last thing we could even be ambitious about is getting our hands on a piano, just finding an actual instrument.
How old were you at this stage?
That particular time was, I think it was around 18. And so that actually is a really fascinating story. When we first came, I didn't have a piano for about 3-4 months, which is pretty disastrous. For a professional, musician, that's a long time. So I had this gradual stage of build up towards the point when I actually finally, we were able to afford to rent a piano for $25 a month. I remember this horrible, I don't know, 100-year-old thing. It was just terrible. But until that point, I would practice. I had at first I would just practice on the table, just on a flat surface, just to feel the notes. And then it's really hilarious. One of my father's friends found an accordion, and this is comical. And I would just lay the accordion down flat and practice on that, the side that has keyboards, just to feel the black and white keys,
Yeah.
And then obviously without sound. And then someone lent us an electronic, synthesizer. I did that for a little while, and finally we ended up being able to rent an old spinet. So that was an insane challenge. I mean, I remember crying a lot and like, I want to practice. This is terrible. So it's an amazing story, amazing journey.
That is indeed, and to be separated from, I guess, your art for what's more than art, really, isn't it? It's deeper than that. It would in itself be a challenge, and you can see behind me, I have some.
Yeah.
They're not the same, are they? I mean, let's face it, playing an accordion would feel very weird.
It was very weird because they were very narrow, the keys.
Yeah, they're very small. Yeah, very weird.
It was hilarious.
Yeah, but there you go. So you've overcome those. Did you, in the line with challenges, what about resistance to you actually pursuing your passion? Did you have to break through any walls, barriers, people who, or that literally just stood in your way?
Well, yes, without a doubt. I mean, there's quite a bit of a cultural stigma because as an Armenian female, you're not really encouraged. Thankfully, times are changing. It's 2018, but still, you're not really encouraged to have a big public, career, a job that's in the public's eye. You're encouraged to stay at home and be a homemaker, et cetera, et cetera. So I definitely heard that at times very subtly, at times quite loudly, and it definitely, I had to really dig in and just find something inside that said, it doesn't matter what anyone says, I cannot live my life in any other way. This is who I am. And that may mean that I'm losing certain friends or certain circles, social circles, but that's okay. It's the price I have to pay. So that's definitely a case. I mean, it's crazy. It's 2018. You would think these sorts of things don't exist anymore, but they still, especially in certain cultures, there's still a little bit of that stigma. So you have to really be strong.
Yeah, well, I think we've come a long way, but we've got a ways to go. I think that's fair to say.
Yeah.
Let's talk about process. I'm fascinated by how other creatives work, and I always like to get a bit of a feel for how they go about it. So do you have a particular routine, a daily routine, a process that you follow, disciplines, superstitions, habits, anything of this? I'm just, how do you go about it?
Well, day to day, my mentality is that you really have to think of yourself as an athlete, which means there is a certain physical aspect of it that you need to maintain. I mean, you just cannot get on the stage and perform a Rachmaninoff concerto or, I don't know, any of these massive pieces if you don't have a day-to-day build up, just like an athlete when they're getting ready for the Olympics or something. So it's amazing. Actually, I have to confess, one of the sources of inspiration that I always look to draw motivation from is actually athletes. I always look at how did Michael Jordan prepare, or how did Muhammad Ali, train. It's fascinating because it's so applicable to what I'm doing day to day, that kind of rigorous regime and structured approach, which actually goes with what Mel Robbins teaches about, you can't wait until you feel like it. And, we artists are known to have that.
No such thing as motivation.
It's terrible. I mean, we really have this like, oh, I'm not inspired today. Well, tough, just get started, get working, and it will come. So I am a rigorous planner. I have, I lay out my schedule both daily, but also I try really hard to do long-term planning. For example, I have this huge performance of a piece I've never played before coming up in October, Gershwin Concerto in F with orchestra. Super excited. So I've never played the piece. I have to just learn it from scratch. So already I'm starting my plan. This is where I want to be by August. This is where I want to be by September, etc. So lots of planning.
Wow.
Yeah. It's exciting. It's a really interesting combination of athletic training and managerial kind of logistical planning. It's not just, oh, you sit at the piano and make beautiful music. It's such a complex, multi-layered lifestyle that you really have to be in control of every one of those aspects to be able to actually deliver at the end. So
fantastic way of looking at it. I'm going to have to lift my game. Very good. One of my questions was, that's interesting that you look to athletes. Are there any other inspirations that you draw from?
Yeah, I really, it's interesting. I very rarely just focus on my own field. Somehow I always have the need to go out of my field and just look at the world of art, the world of dance, again, sports. It's also very fascinating to see great figures in the world of business and just see how they're, I mean, what goes on in their brain. Look at someone like Elon Musk. I mean, who is that guy? How does that brain work? It's fascinating. And then
Elon Musk. Now he'd be interesting.
Yeah, he's a fascinating fellow, and just to try to draw and learn from these guys, because clearly they are on another level. They're not someone that you'll ever hear say, oh, I don't feel like doing it today. Oh, I'll do it tomorrow. I don't think that that's how they operate. And so when I am having a low day and I'm super lazy, that's where I shift my mind to and just kind of think of those guys and draw energy from and inspiration from.
Brilliant. I think I'll get that written on my wall. What would Elon do?
Oh my God.
That's not bad at all. And it's actually one of the things that I have been focusing on in planning and doing this, is that while I call it creative conversations, most people would look at think of that and think, musician, artist, but I'm actually thinking way past that and thinking to business people and things like, I think we're all innately creative. And,
I agree.
And I think we can all learn from each other, and this is what it's about.
Mm-hmm.
So I wanted to come back to something I know that's, you have a mission in what you're doing. And if you're comfortable in talking about it, I'd really like to ask you about that mission.
Oh, my pleasure. I want to redefine classical music. I want the idea of what it means to be a classical musician to be completely transformed. I feel there is this amazing giant divide between the world of classical music, its musicians and orchestras and opera companies and all that, and then the most of the society that doesn't necessarily listen to classical music. And the horrible thing that has, I think, lasted for all these years is the stigma that classical music is for the elite or the rare few, which is incredibly false. And if you research lives of such great composers and figures as someone like Beethoven, he would probably be appalled if he were to hear a sentence like that. I mean, he was this regular guy who would go to a bar, have some beer. Same with Bach. He actually was a huge coffee drinker. So.
Oh, I did not know that. He goes up to my esteem immediately.
Yeah, there's a hilarious quote where he says, "If I haven't had my third cup of coffee, I feel like a goat." It's like, oh, me too.
Man after my own heart. Yeah.
So I do really feel passionate about erasing that divide. And I think both parties need each other tremendously. The classical music world needs more listeners. They need more, to put it bluntly, cash flow. They're struggling financially. There's orchestras going bankrupt and all these things are happening because they're not reaching out, they're not bringing in the listeners, and this ivory tower still exists. At the same time, I feel those who don't listen to great music, to the big, amazing classical masterpieces, are also really missing out. And we are, especially as you can tell from recent times, we're living in such a tough time emotionally, psychologically. People just need some light. They just need something that inspires them and that takes them out of their day-to-day struggles and whatnots. And I think great music does that. I think when you go to a concert of an amazing musician, an amazing orchestra, let's say, you do come out completely altered. And you're a different person, and those little stressful little things are in the background. They're not as taxing emotionally and psychologically. And so both parties really need each other, and my life's mission in a way is to bridge that gap, just bring them close to each other.
And how do we do that? How are you going about that?
I have a complete openness about music. I want to play, I don't want to just say I'm going to play only exclusively for this specific group of listeners or in this specific venue. Yes, I do play in Carnegie halls and all these amazing halls, but I also play in schools. I also play in an art gallery in this hip modernist kind of environment. So I think the biggest thing I as a musician can do is have that openness where what I am sharing, I know that message is needed by everyone. It's not just tailored to one exclusive group. And you think of it, I think, almost as a communication. That's what music is to me. It's a way to communicate. And so you just have this message and you want to communicate it to as many people as you can. Also, we need to get a bit more modernized, a bit more social media savvy and technology savvy. That's also something that the classical world is a little behind on. For example, if you go to Carnegie Hall, you get into serious trouble if you get out your camera. Right. And share a little clip, which would never happen at a rock concert or Beyonce concert. And what do you think? Who is succeeding more? I think it's pretty obvious. So I think maybe that's something that needs to be rethought, and just we get to catch up a little bit. So there's quite a bit of work to do, but at least we should start.
And you're doing your bit, because I know you do some social media, and I know this because I follow you. I'm stalking you.
I did the 365-day project, which has been amazing.
So what are we up to?
208, I believe, today.
Well, I'm a few days behind.
So yeah, that's a great way to just that was my way to open up my world and just say, this is what I do every day. Here's me practicing a small passage. It's not glamorous on a fancy, stage or fancy gowns, just day-to-day life of a musician shared with the world. So.
It's not, well, I wouldn't say it's not glamorous. I wouldn't say that at all. But I think what it is accessible and personal. And
I hope so.
It's fantastic. So I do encourage everyone to and I will put, as I said, links in the show notes so that you can go and follow.
Thank you.
And enjoy these great little snippets, and it's and it's has been a reminder to me that the classical world exists, because I don't generally on a day-to-day basis listen to classical music, but I do like classical music. So it's
Yay, I've won already.
Yeah, you've got one. You've got me back from the dark side.
I'm very happy about that.
Who in the creative space do you admire? Who are?
I admire those who are committed every day. I mean, I was just watching this amazing Russian pianist. His name is Matsuyev, and he I'm a little bit of a fan, as you were describing. I'm the same with him, and I follow, and he would post little bits of his practice, but he's also, it's fascinating to watch him because he's also an artist when he's not doing anything artistic, and he's just, I don't know, watching a soccer game. He just posted it, saw his team, Russia, win. And it's so fascinating to see people in a creative field also be humans, just come out of their perfect artistic bubbles and just interact and be human. And that's, I think, again, going back to that idea of reaching each other and bridging gaps and remembering we're all so human, and we all love soccer and coffee and all these things, that humanness, I think, is so special. That inspires me a lot.
Very, very true. And me as well. Is there a particular space you go to work? Like, is there I mean, with the piano, I suppose it doesn't move very far generally.
No, unfortunately. Well, I have a piano at home. Excuse me. Still recovering from this annoying cold. So I do practice at home, but to just get my mind into a creative space, I do actually purposely step away from the piano. And two of my favorite places to just go and kind of disappear with my journal and do some thinking and planning on, let's say, what my next program is going to be, which is always such an exciting moment, is I would either go to coffee shops. I'm a huge coffee person, and I just love to go into a cute little cafe. Or I just go to parks and just sit in a nice little peaceful environment and just journal away, jot down every possible program option, and then I just kind of narrow it down from there. So it's very, very important, and I say this to all my younger colleagues and students: please have moments when you actually step away from the piano and you just think and just be in a silent space. Don't always just be at the piano. It's not productive.
So there's a good point. Well, the journaling, do you capture that with it's a pen and paper journal for you?
Mm-hmm. I can show you right now. This is my baby. And it's it's really funny. It's actually volume 26, would you believe?
Wow.
Yeah, I've journaled pretty nonstop since high school, I think.
Oh, wow.
And obviously it's gotten much more thorough and detailed. But yeah, I've kept journals all my life where I would keep track of my practice. It's mostly a practice journal, what I'm working on today, but also little tidbits, little inspiring things and thoughts and concepts that I know I'd love to come back and think about more. So, oh my God, journaling is an absolute treasure. I really recommend it.
I'll give it some thought. I don't.
Not
as a journal, but I do capture things, a lot of things. I tend to do it electronically. Do you like capture thoughts and stuff electronically? Is it all purely journal? And if it's, and do you revise that? Do you go back and review it? You've got 20 seconds.
I do. Mostly it's handwritten. I think there's just something magical about actually writing something. It becomes more visceral and you're more connected to it. And I definitely do once in a while. I have this funny little tradition, I guess, at the end of the year, right before New Year's, I like to bring all my journals down and just kind of browse through and have this reliving experience of, see what I did, what I didn't do, where I succeeded, all these, checking kind of moment. You just check in with yourself and see where things are, and then you plan the year ahead. So it's a magical, I really, really enjoy journaling. It's one of my favorite things to do. Yeah. Recommend it highly.
I'll give it a go. I have tried in the past. I must admit, I tried and I stopped. I'll have another.
Well, I think the trick is just to have very basic daily entry. Like just put literally the day and then just a basic breakdown of your day. And then that's perfectly fine. You can just leave it at that. But if you want to go deeper or actually sit down and work on this, then you can do that. So it's just start from very, very basic, you know, kind of skeletal structure.
On any given day, how many hours of practice would you put in?
I try to consistently stay with absolute minimum somewhere between 2 and 4 hours. That's kind of a consistent, again, back to that athletic mindset where you just physically need to be in shape. Having said that, I've had some emergency situations where, let's say, I don't know, someone canceled and I got called in a week before a concert. And then you have to really go crazy and go like, I don't know, 11 hours, however many hours I can do just to get ready.
Wow.
But that's not ideal, of course. You don't want to do that every day. That would be a little crazy. But on average, I would say between 2 to 4 hours minimum.
Amazing. You really are an athlete. And that doesn't surprise me. I've seen you play.
Oh.
Let's think about that 7-year-old Kariné one more time. Let's go back and talk to her.
Okay.
And all the other little 7-year-olds at the same concert, perhaps. And what advice would you give her now, going back? What would?
It's a beautiful question. I think I would just tell her to continue to believe in herself. I think she at that time when she just had that response to that, you know, mean remark from the teacher, I think she already had some belief in herself and inner kind of fire. So I would just encourage and fan that flame more and say, you are your own best source of support, and just keep at it, stay strong. I have had, after that point, I've had so many times when I would let someone get to me, I would let someone make me doubt myself, all of these normal human moments. Yeah. So that would be my biggest advice. Just don't let that happen. Just stay the course. Don't doubt yourself. What you're doing is important.
Excellent. And I actually, during the course of the week, when I was looking for that quote on the one buttock playing, I stumbled again across Benjamin Zander, and he talks in one of his talks. He's talking about the violinist who has that. There's actually two violinists, one that's playing and one that's standing behind, whispering in his ear, saying, "You haven't practiced enough." And I love that. How do you?
Oh my gosh, that sounds very familiar.
How do you deal with those inner voices? We've all got them. So.
My gosh, it's hard. It's very, very hard. And I think the first thing that you have to do is just admit that they exist. Admit that you are your own worst enemy, worst critic. It's not easy. Even as I was getting ready for this Carnegie Hall performance, as you and I just chatted a bit before, it was the single biggest thing I'd ever done. And it just felt so overwhelming at times. I was like, what am I doing? This is crazy. So the first thing is, acknowledge that inner little annoying critic is always there, will always be there. To the second thing, to actually try and put that to use, and to positive use, where you listen and say, hey, maybe, let's see, if I'm feeling insecure about that one particular passage, you know what, let me maybe invest another 10 minutes and let me work on that a little bit. So you turn it into a productive use. And ultimately, just the biggest way to deal with it is just to go beyond yourself, beyond the ego, and just focus on the music. Because when you tune into that field that's bigger than you, bigger than anyone, it's just this godlike divine energy, which music, I think, is a representation of. And these small, little, nasty little voices become so insignificant, and it just, you're on another level. They don't get to you anymore. So just focus on the actual big picture, the big mission, the music itself.
In a similar vein, we live in a fast-paced, demanding modern
Mm.
world, how do you deal with the distractions?
Mm. Not easy, definitely. Very, very mindful with phone, mindful with social media, which, as you know, is not easy because you have to be very present on social media as an artist to
Yes.
share with with your fans and followers. But you consciously shut down those things and just go go into my practice room and just focus on the music. Again, the journaling really helps because the journaling is just between me and me. No one gets to this. You know what I mean? It's a very private
Mm.
moment of reflection and thought process. So if you find specific tools like that, I think you're able to control at least a little bit. But yeah, I know it's not easy in this day and age. And also, I don't own a television. That helps.
Oh,
No
wow.
TV.
That's, well, you're your own entertainment. Let's face it. You can just sit there. No TV. What about radio?
Yeah, I listened a little bit, but TV was just, yeah, I made a conscious decision to get rid of TV about 2 or 3 years ago. It was an absolute life changer. I really, when I look back at myself from 3 years ago and now, you can hardly recognize because it just, it can become a big, big distraction and negative one at that, especially with news and everything going on. So, I mean, I'm very tuned in and I listen to major events, of course, what's happening
Mm.
in the world. Um, but I don't have to sit in front of a television for hours on end and waste precious time and energy. So that was very, I think it was a wise decision just for me personally.
Very well. I'm struggling to think how I would deal with that, actually.
You don't have to. It was just a
I think it's an
personal
interesting
thing.
idea. I'm actually not a big fan of TV per se, but I do love movies and things like
I
that.
see.
So I couldn't live without
Uh-huh.
Netflix. Don't tell them
Mhm.
that. um, where to next?
Where to next? Well, I have a very exciting trip coming up to Italy in July.
Mm.
Super excited. I've actually never been to Italy, so it's my first time. And I'm teaching at this wonderful music festival there called Interharmony International Music Festival. And I'll be teaching there, I'll be performing there. So that's on the short term, that's the first thing I'm preparing for. And then, of course, the big Gershwin in October. Oh my gosh, that's at the forefront of my mind. I really have to push and learn that thing. It's quite the piece.
Oh, wow. Fantastic. And is any of that being filmed or is it purely a private once?
It might be. It might be. I don't quite know. I think the Italy festival is documented quite thoroughly. Don't quite know yet about the Gershwin, but possibly.
I'll keep my eye on it. And we've got a couple of small halls over here. There's a little thing in Sydney called the Opera House.
Oh my gosh.
And
I would love to. You let me know if there is any possibility. I would be thrilled. I've never been to Australia, and
a little closer to my home, there's Hamer Hall here in Melbourne, and I can hear you playing there.
all right. You
Put
set
that
it up.
put that on your bucket list because
All right. Putting it in here.
put it in your journal. We'd love to have you come down.
Thank you. I would be thrilled.
It's been wonderful talking to you. I'm sure we'll talk again. And thank you for sharing your passion and your process. Is there anything that you'd like to add?
Well, I want to add a huge thanks to you. Thank you for your warm, positive spirit. I think what you're doing is so special.
Oh, thank you. You're welcome.
I'm very much inspired by you. So I am beyond looking forward to seeing what you do next and you're seeing more of your work. I think you're a wonderful, wonderful spirit. So just want to add huge thanks to you.
Oh, thank you. You're too sweet. One last thing I'm going to ask you to do before I let you go is give some thought to who I could interview that you'd like me to interview, that perhaps you have a connection with and could recommend to come on and have a chat to me. You don't have to tell me now, but I'll ask you to do that because part of what I want to do, part of, I guess, my mission is to inspire other people to connect with their creative self and to be inspired by people who are doing it. So if you can do that for me, that would be awesome. And once again, I'll turn the recording off now, but we'll chat offline again after this quickly. But thank you so very much for your time. And I wish you all the very, very best for your future endeavors.
Thank you so much, David.
Thank you.